12 Angry Men is a tense courtroom drama that takes place almost entirely in a jury room. The film explores themes of justice, prejudice, doubt, and morality, showing how personal biases and perspectives influence decision-making. The movie begins inside a courtroom, where a judge gives final instructions to the jury. He tells them that their decision must be unanimous, meaning all 12 jurors must agree on the same verdict. If they find the defendant guilty, he will be sentenced to death by electric chair. The defendant, a young man from a poor neighborhood, sits quietly. He has been accused of murdering his father, and the evidence against him seems strong. Two key witnesses claim they either saw or heard the crime happen. The prosecution has also pointed out that the boy owned a switchblade knife similar to the one found at the crime scene. To the average person, this might seem like an easy case. The judge's voice is flat and uninterested, as if he is tired of handling cases like this. This lack of emotion suggests that for him, this is just another routine trial, one of many. He does not seem to care about the life or death consequences of the jury's decision. The defendant, on the other hand, looks nervous and powerless. He has no lawyers or family around him. He is just a poor boy facing 12 strangers who will decide if he lives or dies. From the start, the movie shows how society judges people based on their background. The defendant is from a low-income neighborhood, which makes some jurors assume he must be violent or dishonest. Instead of treating him as an individual, they see him as a stereotype. This bias plays a major role in how some jurors make their decisions later in the film. This opening scene sets up the central conflict of the movie. Will the jury truly seek justice, or will they let their prejudices and assumptions make the decision for them? The 12 jurors step into a small, cramped room where they will discuss the case. The windows are closed, making the room feel hot and stuffy. Some jurors loosen their ties or wipe sweat from their faces. Right away, we can tell that the uncomfortable setting will add to the tension between them. At first, the jurors don't take the case very seriously. They make small talk about baseball, the weather, and their jobs. Most of them believe this is an easy decision. The defendant is guilty, and they just need to make it official. Some jurors, like Juror 7, are impatient and want to finish quickly. He even mentions that he has tickets to a baseball game and doesn't want to be stuck in the room all day. This shows that he cares more about his personal plans than a young man's life. Others, like Juror 3, act confident that the boy is guilty and see no reason to discuss the case further. He is loud and opinionated, making it clear that he won't change his mind easily. Juror 8 is the only one who seems to be thinking carefully about the case. He stays quiet at first, observing the other jurors and preparing for what's to come. Most jurors don't see the case as important. To them, it's just a duty they need to finish as quickly as possible. They don't think deeply about whether the boy is actually guilty or innocent. Their casual attitudes reveal a common flaw in the justice system. People don't always take their responsibilities seriously, even when someone's life is at stake. This scene sets up the central conflict. One man, Juror 8, believes in discussing the case thoroughly, while the others are too biased, impatient, or indifferent to care. Once the jurors settle in, they decide to take a preliminary vote to see where everyone stands. Each juror raises their hand if they find the defendant guilty or not guilty. The result is 11-1, guilty. The lone not guilty vote belongs to Juror 8. The other jurors immediately react with frustration and disbelief. Most of them assumed this would be a quick decision, but now they are forced to talk about the case instead of simply declaring the boy guilty and going home. Juror 8 does not say the boy is innocent, only that he is not sure. He believes they should at least discuss the case thoroughly before making a decision that could send someone to death. This shows that he values justice over convenience. Juror 8 is a symbol of reason, fairness, and moral responsibility. While the other jurors follow the majority without questioning, he is willing to stand alone because he believes it is the right thing to do. The other jurors react in different ways. Juror 7, the impatient one, is annoyed because he just wants to go to his baseball game. Juror 3, the aggressive one, is angry, convinced that the boy is guilty beyond a doubt. Juror 10, the prejudiced one, makes biased comments, assuming the boy is a criminal because of where he comes from. Their immediate frustration shows that they are not interested in discussing the case fairly. Instead, they let their impatience personal biases, and emotions influence their judgment. This moment highlights the theme of groupthink, which happens when people follow the majority without thinking for themselves. The other jurors assume the case is simple because everyone else thinks so. Juror 8, however, challenges this mindset. By standing alone, he forces the others to slow down and re-examine the case. His courage shows that one person with integrity can make a difference, even against a room full of opposition. After the first vote, Juror 8 begins challenging the evidence. One of the strongest pieces of evidence against the defendant is the murder weapon, a switchblade knife. The prosecution claimed it was unique, meaning no one else could have owned the same knife. Juror 8 questions this claim and asks the jurors if they are certain that it was truly one of a kind. The other jurors dismiss his concerns, believing the knife proves the boy's guilt. Then, in a dramatic moment, Juror 8 pulls out an identical knife and slams it into the table. The room goes silent. Juror 8 explains that he bought the same knife at a shop near the defendant's neighborhood the night before. This proves that the knife isn't unique and could have been bought by anyone. This moment is crucial because it weakens the prosecution's case. The jurors realize that if the knife isn't unique, then it's possible that someone else committed the murder using a similar weapon. The knife represents doubt, the doubt that Juror 8 is trying to create in the minds of the other jurors. Before this moment, many of them saw the case as clear-cut, but now they start questioning whether the prosecution's evidence is truly solid. The knife also symbolizes the flaws in the justice system. The prosecution presented the knife as if it proved guilt, but Juror 8 shows how easy it is to challenge evidence that seems undeniable. Up until now, Juror 8 was alone, and the others dismissed his concerns. But after this moment, the dynamic in the room shifts. Some jurors start to doubt their original decision. This is the first time Juror 8 gains control of the conversation. He forces the others to think more critically instead of just accepting the prosecution's arguments without question. Though most jurors still believe the boy is guilty, this moment marks the beginning of real discussion and the slow unraveling of the case against the defendant. After revealing that the murder weapon isn't unique, Juror 8 sees that the other jurors are still not convinced. So he makes a bold offer. He proposes a secret ballot where he will not vote. If all 11 remaining jurors still vote guilty, he promises to change his vote and let the case end. But if even one person votes not guilty, they will continue discussing the case. The jurors agree and cast their votes anonymously. When the votes are counted, one more juror has switched to not guilty. The juror who changed his vote is Juror 9, the oldest member of the jury. He explains that he doesn't necessarily believe the defendant is innocent, but respects Juror 8's willingness to question the case. He believes the case deserves more discussion before making a final decision. This is the first crack in the majority's certainty. Before, Juror 8 stood alone, but now someone else is willing to stand with him. Juror 9's decision represents the power of independent thinking. He recognizes that people often assume things to be true without fully questioning them. By supporting Juror 8, he shows that challenging assumptions is necessary when deciding something as serious as a person's life. The secret ballot is important because it allows the jurors to vote without fear of judgment from others. In the first vote, some jurors may have felt pressured to say guilty because that was the majority opinion. But when they can vote in private, at least one juror feels safe enough to express doubt. This represents individual conscience, the idea that people should think for themselves rather than blindly follow the crowd. Now that doubt has started to spread, more jurors will begin to question the evidence and arguments, leading to deeper discussions and more shifts in opinion. Now that the jury is taking the case more seriously, they start re-examining the witness testimonies. One of the key witnesses was an old man who lived downstairs from the crime scene. He claimed that he heard the boy yell, "I'm going to kill you." He heard a body hit the floor, and he saw the boy running down the stairs just seconds after the murder. This testimony made the case against the boy seem strong. But Juror 8 and others start questioning whether the old man could have really seen and heard everything as he claimed. To test the old man's testimony, the jurors analyze his apartment layout using a floor plan. The old man had a limp and walked with a cane. He claimed that after hearing the body fall, he got out of bed and reached his door in 15 seconds to see the boy running down the stairs. Juror 8 suggests reenacting the old man's walk, and he imitates the way the old man would move, walking across the jury room at a similar pace. When they time the walk, it takes much longer than 15 seconds. This means the old man could not have reached the door in time to see the boy running away. His testimony is unreliable. This scene shows how memory is not perfect. The old man may have believed he saw the boy, but his mind could have filled in the blanks based on what he thought happened. This weakens the prosecution's case. If one key witness was wrong, the other witnesses might be wrong too. It forces the jurors to think critically instead of just accepting testimony as absolute truth. This shows that Juror 8's method, questioning evidence and reenacting events, works. As a result, more jurors start reconsidering their votes, bringing the jury closer to a real debate about the case. As the discussion continues, tensions in the room keep rising. The jurors have now proven that the old man's testimony was unreliable. Some of them start changing their votes to not guilty, frustrating those who still believe the boy is guilty. One of the most stubborn jurors is Juror 3. He is loud, aggressive, and deeply emotional. He believes the boy is guilty no matter what and refuses to consider doubt. At this point, Juror 3 loses control. He gets up, furious, and starts shouting at Juror 8, who remains calm. The argument escalates until Juror 3 yells, "I'll kill him." Earlier in the trial, the prosecution argued that the boy must have meant it when he allegedly shouted, "I'm going to kill you," before his father was murdered. But now, Juror 3 himself has shouted the exact same words, yet he clearly didn't mean them literally. This moment proves that people say things in anger without truly meaning them. This scene is not just about anger. It reveals something deeper about Juror 3. His hatred for the defendant is personal, not logical. His strong emotions cloud his judgment. He's not thinking with reason, and his outburst mirrors the case itself, proving that words alone do not equal intent. This moment is a turning point because it undermines a key argument for guilt and shows how prejudice and emotion can distort justice. After Juror 3's emotional outburst, the jury takes another vote. This time, two more jurors, Jurors 2 and 6, change their votes to not guilty. The count is now 6-6, meaning the jury is evenly split. Half believe the defendant is guilty, while the other half believe there is reasonable doubt. By this point, the arguments from Juror 8 and his supporters have exposed flaws in the prosecution's case. The old man's testimony was proven unreliable. The knife wasn't unique, meaning someone else could have used it. And Juror 3's outburst proved that words spoken in anger don't always mean intent to kill. These logical arguments make Jurors 2 and 6 question their initial certainty. Before, Juror 8 was isolated and outnumbered. Now, he has strong support, making the remaining guilty voters feel pressured to defend their stance. The jurors take a closer look at the murder weapon and how the stabbing happened. The victim's stab wound was angled downward. The defendant is shorter than his father, so stabbing downward would be unnatural. Juror 5, who grew up in a tough neighborhood, explains that experienced knife fighters use switchblades differently. He demonstrates that people who know how to use switchblades don't stab downward. They flip the knife open and stab upward for speed and control. This contradicts the prosecution's argument that the boy, who was used to street fights, would have stabbed his father in this way. Up until now, many jurors assumed the boy must have stabbed his father because he owned the knife. But this scene introduces a new fact. If the boy was an experienced knife user, he wouldn't have stabbed downward. This makes the case weaker and raises reasonable doubt. Juror 5 grew up in a rough neighborhood, where he likely saw people use switchblades in fights. His experience allows him to explain something no one else in the room knew. This highlights an important idea. Personal experiences can provide valuable perspectives. If the jury had ignored Juror 5, they would have missed a key flaw in the prosecution's case. This moment adds another layer of doubt and pushes the jury closer to a final decision. During the deliberations, Juror 10 begins a hateful rant about the defendant's background, saying things like, "People like him are all the same." He points out the defendant's poverty and ethnicity, suggesting that his guilt is almost a given because of who he is. Juror 10's tirade targets the defendant's race and social class, saying people like him can't be trusted or are naturally bad. The other jurors, however, silently start to turn away from him. Juror 10's rant reveals how deeply racial and class biases can influence decision-making. His attack on the defendant is not based on the evidence, but on stereotypes about people from poor, immigrant backgrounds. This moment highlights the role of bias, how people may make judgments about others based on their background rather than facts or reason. The other jurors' reaction is key. They don't engage with Juror 10's bigotry directly, but their silent rejection says everything. Some jurors physically move away from him, which shows how uncomfortable they are with his views. This quiet rejection symbolizes a moral awakening. The jurors begin to realize that Juror 10's views are not acceptable. They are silently rejecting his hatred and moving toward a more reasonable decision. The way the group handles Juror 10's rant reflects a moment of collective moral growth. The jury starts to recognize that they must set aside their personal prejudices to make a fair decision. By isolating him, the other jurors show that they will not let bias control the verdict, reinforcing the idea that justice should be blind to race and class. In this scene, Juror 9 makes a key observation about the eyewitness who claimed to have seen the murder. He notices that the woman has impressions on her nose, which suggests that she wears glasses. However, she never mentioned wearing them during her testimony. Juror 9 realizes that since the woman was lying in bed when the murder occurred, she likely wasn't wearing her glasses at the time, which would have made it difficult for her to see clearly. Juror 8 also adds that it's possible the woman couldn't have had enough time to properly put her glasses on to witness such an important event, further casting doubt on her testimony. The glasses symbolize the blurry truth of the case. Just like how the woman might not have seen clearly, the entire case has been filled with unclear, unreliable testimonies. The glasses also represent the distortion of reality. The truth isn't always as clear as it seems at first. This moment highlights how important it is to question what we think we know and examine all perspectives. Juror 9's observation helps solidify the idea of reasonable doubt, which grows stronger in the minds of the jurors. Once the group begins to question the reliability of the eyewitness, the whole case starts to fall apart for the prosecution. This moment also encourages the idea of thinking critically about what is presented as fact. Just because a witness testifies to something doesn't mean it's automatically the truth. Juror 9's willingness to question the details of the case leads the group to think more carefully about all the evidence rather than just accepting things at face value. As the jury reaches the final vote, Juror 3 is still the only one who insists that the defendant is guilty. The other jurors have changed their votes, and they have convinced each other that reasonable doubt exists. Juror 3, however, is furious and refuses to let go of his belief that the defendant is guilty. His anger grows, and in a moment of emotional outburst, he shouts and argues with the other jurors. Eventually, Juror 3 breaks down and reveals something deeply personal. He has resentment and unresolved anger toward his own estranged son. His intense emotions and personal pain have influenced his judgment throughout the case. Overcome with emotion, he finally changes his vote to not guilty, breaking down in tears as he does. Juror 3's refusal to change his vote stems from his personal pain. He has a difficult relationship with his son, and it's clear that he has not come to terms with his feelings of hurt, anger, and abandonment. Throughout the film, his personal issues cloud his judgment of the case. He projects his resentment onto the defendant. In his mind, the defendant's actions remind him of his own failed father-son relationship, making it difficult for him to see the case objectively. The defendant, to him, becomes a symbol of his own son, and his deep-seated emotions make it nearly impossible for him to be fair. Juror 3's breakdown exposes how personal bias can cloud someone's judgment. His strong feelings toward his son are preventing him from making an impartial decision on the case. He can't separate his emotions from the facts. The moment when Juror 3 breaks down and reveals his inner conflict serves as a reminder that we are not always objective. Emotions, experiences, and personal histories can influence how we view situations, often leading us to make decisions based on feelings rather than facts. The final shift happens because the other jurors, especially Juror 8, show empathy toward Juror 3. Instead of attacking him or dismissing his emotions, they listen and allow him the space to acknowledge his pain. This moment of vulnerability is what ultimately changes Juror 3's vote. Empathy plays a crucial role in this scene. By understanding the source of Juror 3's anger, the other jurors can help him see past his own emotions and realize the importance of making a decision based on reason and justice, not personal issues. After the final vote, the jury has reached a unanimous decision of not guilty, and the trial is over. As the jurors leave the courthouse, Jurors 8 and 9 are the only ones who exchange names before parting ways. This small moment of connection between them marks the end of the trial and highlights a subtle but significant shift. The exchange of names represents a mutual respect that has developed between them throughout the deliberation. These two jurors were among the first to question the evidence and speak out when the others rushed to judgment. Over the course of the deliberation, they were both open-minded and willing to listen to different perspectives. Their decision to introduce themselves at the end of the trial suggests that, despite their differences, they have formed a bond through the process of seeking truth and justice together. It's a small gesture that shows that the process of coming to a fair decision isn't just about facts, but also about human connection and understanding. 12 Angry Men is a masterclass in storytelling, showing how a single voice of reason can challenge the status quo. It remains a powerful study of human nature, justice, and morality, proving that truth isn't always as clear as it seems. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.